Alright, for what values of x is this expression undefined? So the first thing you have to realize is that an undefined expression is when the bottom or the denominator is 0. That means we're dividing something by 0, and we can never divide by 0 because that's undefined. So they're asking, when is this equal to 0? Okay, so actually I'll pull this up. So here's our denominator, and we're setting that equal to 0, and we want to figure out values of x. Well, we're not really used to seeing something with such a high power, so we're going to have to be tricky about this. The first step here is we should factor out anything we can, and we can factor out a 2. You notice that everything is even, so you can factor out a 2, and we'll get, what do we get? We'll get x cubed minus 3 plus 3 minus 9 equals 0. So this is just factoring out the 2, right? We can write it in parentheses with a 2 in front, and then divide it all by 2, and that's just 0 again, so we can just leave it as this. Now, the next trick we're going to have to do is factoring by grouping, and that's a good option when you see something like x cubed. So we're actually going to group this, and we're going to group this. Just putting a parentheses around, no multiplication here. We're not changing anything. We're just kind of drawing the parentheses so that we can see for ourselves what we should be factoring in a group. So we're not multiplying anything, just writing in parentheses. So 3x minus 9 equals 0. So we're still adding these, we didn't change the order of operations at all, just adding parentheses. Now, what can we factor from here? Well, we can factor x squared. That's the greatest common factor, x squared. So actually, we don't need parentheses, x squared times x minus 3. See, when we factor the x squared, this becomes x, and this becomes 3. So x squared times x minus 3, and then plus, and we can factor 3 from here, 3 times x minus 3. Aha! So now we see a common factor. We have this quantity plus this quantity equals 0. And we can actually factor out this x minus 3. And what that looks like is x minus 3 times x squared plus 3 equals 0. So now this is much easier to solve, right? So when is this multiplication problem 0? Well, it's either when this quantity is 0 or when this quantity is 0, so we can evaluate each individually, right? So x minus 3 is 0 when x equals 3, and x squared plus 3 equals 0. Well, I'm not sure that even has a solution because we'd need x squared to equal negative 3 for that to equal 0. And that can never happen, right? So if we have x squared plus 3 equals 0, x squared would have to equal negative 3 by subtracting 3 from both sides. But a squared term can never be negative, right? Because if we have a negative times a negative, it's positive, and a positive times a positive is positive. So you notice that this just has no solution. So the only time this whole denominator is 0 is when x equals 3. That's the only 0 here. So when x equals 3 is the only 0. And let's see if that's the correct answer. Correct. And see, they did the same thing. Factoring the denominator, we obtain this, and this is the only 0 when x equals 3. Correct. Good job. And please feel free to email me or call me and set up a time to talk if you ever want any more help with this. Thanks.